Welcome to How I Lead, a new series of interviews from Thomson Reuters. My name is Steve Acey, and I'm head of Canada for Thomson Reuters. In this series, I speak with leaders of the legal profession in Canada. I ask them how they have been successful and what best practices they have to share with other leaders. I'm joined today by Joan Ratayak Lang, Executive Director of the Toronto Lawyers Association, TLA, and Library Director of the Courthouse Library. TLA has been serving lawyers in Toronto for over 130 years. The association provides services to members in three areas: knowledge, advocacy, and community. The organization supports the Courthouse Library, which provides an extensive collection of printed and electronic sources of legal information. The library also provides physical facilities to support lawyers in the city. TLA is heavily involved in supporting charitable and educational activities, hosts social events throughout the year, and an awards gala annually. As executive director of the TLA, Joan is responsible for implementing policies set by the Board of Trustees, as well as annual goals and objectives and financial, program, and administrative management of the association. Joan has a long history in the excellence in the delivery of legal research services, including serving in the law library of a large national law firm. Joan and I recently had the opportunity to catch up, and she told me about her efforts to build the membership base of the TLA and expand the scope of its services. I'm looking forward to learning more about her story and the TLA mission. All right, Joan, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So I'd like to start by talking about your career and how you've gotten to where you are now. Can you tell us about where you grew up and how you ultimately made the decision to go to university at Queen's and then get your Master's of Library Information Studies at McGill?
Well, I grew up in Hamilton, in an sort of low-income immigrant community, and was very fortunate. When I started high school, I learned that the public library in the neighborhood was looking for a page. That's what they called the high school students who worked in the library. And I have not left libraries since. That was a truly satisfying experience because that library was a hub in the community. I saw the people who couldn't afford to buy books reading voraciously by borrowing. The kids who came to the library after school, I think sometimes we may have been a free babysitting service. The Saturday Fun Day program that we ran. And I had some wonderful role models there. The head librarian, I don't know, we're talking a long time ago. I think she saw something in me. It was not a unionized environment. So I was not doing your typical high school student work. She had me doing work that a library technician would be doing now. And I just loved everything I was doing, the satisfaction. When the librarian went for dinner in the evening and it was just two of us in there, she always said, "Now, if a question comes in, you let me know and I'll come out and answer it." But when one of the little kids wanted a book about dinosaurs and I knew the library intimately because I touched every book there, I wasn't going to go and bother her. I helped them get the book. I showed them the table of contents, the index, how to use it. It just sort of set me up for my whole career because the satisfaction of serving was very meaningful. And apparently my roommate at Queen's told me my first year when we first met, I immediately told her I was going to be a librarian. Now I decided to go to Queen's. I'm from Hamilton, but I think you probably already know I'm a bit of a nerd. I was back then, and that's before being a nerd was cool, right? So I thought I could go to McMaster, which is where my parents wanted me to go, but it would have felt a bit like high school. It was the same old people, and I was wanting to explore life a little bit more. Queen's had an excellent reputation. I had good grades, so I went to Queen's and worked hard because I knew that I was going to go to graduate school. And by that point, I could have gone, the schools in the area were Western, U of T, or McGill. Why not try living in Montreal for a few years? So that's what I did. And that was the beginning of a very long and satisfactory career.
That's fantastic. So you graduate McGill, you ultimately end up at a large national Bay Street firm. How did the opportunity to join TLA in the courthouse library come up?
Wow, well, that was a long career before I actually got to the Toronto Lawyers Association. So, I didn't go into this intentionally to be a law librarian. I really wanted to be a public librarian, but there weren't any jobs. Um, and there were a lot of jobs when I was looking in law libraries. So it was a perfect fit in some ways. I had a history degree. I was always interested in news and current events and things like that. Um, so I started at a smaller firm, and when things got to be same old, I went to a medium-sized firm, and then I went to a larger firm. And there was a lot of opportunities there. It was a seven sister firm. I don't think they call them that anymore, but back in the day, it meant you were a top tier firm. There was a lot of opportunity for innovation, thinking creatively. But after a lot of years, again, I was like, I need a change. And then what really cemented that was the recession in 2008. There was a lot of cutbacks. And, they say you learn during the hard times. I learned a lot during those hard times. But it also meant that the firm was a little bit different, where we were doing really neat stuff, creating databases, working with knowledge management. I think we were really leading edge. That ceased to be an opportunity. So when the job at the TLA came open, I jumped at the chance. And here I am 13 years later.
It's that's a major transition to go from being a law librarian to being the executive director of a nonprofit organization and being the library director of your very own library. Just unpack that transition a little bit for me. What leadership skills did you need to develop? What surprised you most? I'd love to just hear more about that.
You're right. It was a humongous transition. And I probably went in a little overconfidently. I knew the library stuff. I've been running my own libraries for a long time and had learned a lot over the years. But I really didn't have an appreciation for what the association did. I was a little bit naive, but because I didn't know what questions to ask. So it was challenging, and I had a few alarm bells early on when I left. When I was leaving the law firm, the memo went out saying Joan's leaving us, and a couple of the partners we were high up in the elevator bank, so it was a long elevator ride, and people would say to me, "Oh, Joan, where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to the Toronto Lawyers Association," and I would get blank looks. Never heard of it. And I thought, oh dear me, what have I done?
You're a Toronto lawyer.
You're a Toronto lawyer.
I want you to know about it.
And I'm going to this association that ostensibly is the Toronto Lawyers Association. So we got a bit of a disconnect here. So when I got here, I started doing a really thorough analysis. And I tell you, that's one of the skills I really developed was my analytical skills. Some of it was pretty straightforward. I noticed that the membership numbers had been in decline for a long time. And the things didn't make sense, some of the processes and stuff. So I realized that we needed to modernize. So I'm an optimist. I'm very determined. And rather than run in the other direction, I said to myself, I'm going to make a go of this. In retrospect, I realized this was probably the biggest career challenge I've ever faced. But there are a few things that stood me well. One that I think a thing people overlook is common sense. I I didn't know a lot about associations, but I started thinking, okay, why do people join the TLA? As we call it in the community, in the not-for-profit. What's the MVP, member value proposition? Why do people join us? Well, I think we needed to work on that a little bit. I also noticed that we had a static website, but we were in the 21st century and maybe we needed to use technology. So my skills, really my analytical skills, figuring out processes, what made sense, were all coming into play here. And the other thing I think that is fundamental everywhere is communication. I've always prided myself on being a pretty good communicator, but it's easy when you've been somewhere or you've built a trust relationship, you have a staff who know you, who's worked with you, and things are good. Come into a new place and you start upsetting the apple cart, even though you try to have those meetings where there's open discussion, I saw a lot of body language that said to me, really? We don't think we like what you're saying. So where I've always tried to sort of bring people in and get them to buy into my ideas, the innovation, where we need to go, it's feeling a little bit of standoffishness. So I just had to say, well, we're doing this as nicely as I could, as respectfully as I could, but I had to put my foot down. And turns out people started accepting that because they could see that we were making changes. When I'm talking about, that's with the staff, right? They were the ones, they're the day-to-day, we're running the operation. So while I was doing this during the day, I had signed up for, I can't remember what it was a certificate at U of T's continuing education school. I took an accounting and finance course. I took out a marketing course, and then talked to a few classmates who said, after this, everything else in this certificate is downhill. So I said, okay, we're gonna put a pause on this, and I'm gonna look for other opportunities to educate myself. Now, meanwhile, I also had to communicate with the board, and that's a different communication style, right? You know, in the law firm, I reported to a C something. She was C-suite. You know, I'd go into her office every second week. We'd sit, we'd talk, off I'd go. But now I had a board of 24 people. And I learned over the years how to communicate with them. You've got to do a report, but I find that I communicate better verbally. So would always make sure I had that opportunity in meetings and board meetings. So yeah, it was a challenging time, but you know, I survived it.
This is a series about leaders. So I'm curious, Joan, how do you describe your own personal leadership style?
I like to be inclusive and participative. I think it goes with my personality. I like people. I like to bring people together. And what better way to do that than allow people to really be engaged? Now, I'm fortunate. The largest team I've ever supervised is 11 or 12 people. So you can do that. I mean, in your position, how would you do that? Well, maybe you'd have a town hall every so often. That's probably what I would do. But when the team is smaller, it's easier to sit down and have those discussions. I think that's really important. And sharing information is meaningful. People know that you trust them, that you respect them, and they know why you're doing what you're doing. So for example, another sort of sad example, but again, 2008, cut the library budget. That was the mandate. Fortunately, in the case of libraries, a lot of things are subscription-based, so it wasn't one of those, next week, you have to be spending this much less. I was able to convince the powers that be that I needed some time and I could reassess our collection. We didn't have to go into cutting heads because that was very common in 2007, 2008. So I had a meeting with the staff. I think I had a PowerPoint with a roller coaster trying to, sort of say, this is going to be a ride, guys. We have to cut the budget. So I shared with them, but also didn't share too much because you can imagine what it would have done to morale if I said, now, you know what? I didn't cut any of you because I have this. We didn't go there. I knew that. All they knew was, okay, we have to do this. And they immediately, there was some shock, some disbelief. Then people started understanding what we were doing. And then they'd come to me with ideas. Joan, we just got the shipment of something or other. Before I process it, do you want to take a look at it or speak to somebody about it? We assessed everything. And through a bit of attrition, nobody had to be fired. We were able to do what we needed to do. So, you know what? I really feel like the team is essential, and whatever you can do to make sure that your team is strong. Now, the other thing is I hire the best people I can, and I let them do what they need to do. I hate to be micromanaged. I do not like to be told that needs to be written with a 0.7 millimeter pencil, not a 0.5. No, that doesn't work for me. And I don't treat others that way. If they're intelligent, capable, with a little discussion, figuring out what goals and objectives are, people can go off and do their own jobs. Sure, sometimes someone who's new might need a little more guidance, but it's guidance. It's not direction, not telling them what to do. You want them to figure it out. And, it's been a lifelong of learning to get to that. I'm very hard on myself. And when I was young, I was hard on those around me and maybe wasn't always as understanding. So, it's evolved to that where I recognize how I work best with my team.
What I love about what you're saying is it's a great lesson for all of us. Identify great people, bring them in, and then communicate effectively with them and let them know what your goals are. And if you've hired the right people, they'll dig in and they'll help you find a way there. But if they don't know what your goals are, they can't help. So
That's right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Joan, I want to transition to the organizations that you lead now. So you support two organizations, TLA and the Courthouse Library. Can you describe how those organizations work together?
Well, it's the library is the raison d'etre for the TLA. So in the 1800s, when the Law Society started funding libraries across the province, there are 48 county courthouse libraries. The mandate was you form an association, the association will get the funding to run the library. And it has been thus ever since. So really, we have a board of directors. We rename them. I think you use trustees. That I have to update my bio on LinkedIn. But so we have a board of directors, and they have oversight over everything because the money comes from the Law Society, but not directly. It comes through LEARN. I can never remember what Library Information Research Network. So they're our funder. They give us the money and we run the library with it. So the two are separate because we have association staff. So we've evolved over the years to become more of a true not-for-profit association with a variety of things that we do, but we continue to run the library. So it's a funny situation, but for reporting purposes, we do separate. We have to make sure that library money gets spent on library stuff and the other money gets spent on everything else. That's how we manage it.
What types of services through either organization do you provide to your members?
Well, our pillars are knowledge, advocacy, and community. Education is a big part of knowledge. It really encompasses a lot of what we stand for. So we do more than 40 education programs a year. For a small association, I think that's pretty good. course, we run the courthouse library, and that's a very big, important offering. It makes us unique. No other association in Toronto does something like that. Also, my background in law firms made me realize what was missing when I got here. While our members span everyone from sole practitioners to large law firms, the biggest users are soles and smalls. They don't have the infrastructure that the firms on Bay Street had. So how do you bridge that gap? So we do a lot of knowledge products. We have published the Toronto Law Journal for a long time before I started, but since then we've added the Weekly Verdict, and we do the TLA Newsstand. We partner with other companies to do these things. We don't have the staff big enough, but it's important. You're a lawyer, it's important to know what's the Supreme Court said on something. What was that decision that came down Thursday? I think I need to read about that. Well, we make sure that they get the updates that they need about case law, legislation, other things that are of interest, what's happening at MAG or the courts, wherever. So that is the knowledge piece. The advocacy piece, I'm very proud of the work we've done there. We speak out on a lot of issues. We get asked to provide feedback, submissions, all kinds of things, and community. And I think we really have learned about community since COVID. We had events before. The last event in the Toronto legal community on the 5th of March, 2020, was our awards gala. And then the world closed down. And nothing happened for a few years. Nobody was getting together in person. And we had our first live awards gala again in May of 2022. We pushed it a little bit. We changed the venue so that we would have windows and an outdoor patio and all. People wouldn't have to take an elevator. People were so happy to be together. And you came to our gala this year at the Carlu. I think you had fun. Yeah. And now, I just did a brainstorming session with the new lawyers committee, and they said, we have some social events, but Joan, we want more stuff. We want more opportunities to collect. So we have we're calling it our Sunset Social on the roof of a 4th-story pub, the Porch, it's called. So that always sells out, and we're planning some other things because that's what people are looking for, especially when you're a sole practitioner or in a small firm. You're a little bit isolated, right? So being able to give people that community feel, I think, is really important.
Well, and it's so complementary to your first pillar of knowledge, right? Like, the community is what helps the sharing of knowledge, and by bringing those solo lawyers together, it gives them that opportunity to share information with each other.
Yeah. Well, we're doing our education programs, some virtually, some in person, but definitely even before COVID, after a program was over, people didn't just file out. There was chatting, there was kibbutzing, so we often have a social afterwards. It's like, okay, well, here's a little more food, have something to drink, and enjoy each other's company. It's something that we can do because we're not super big, and I think people know us. And when I say that, I don't mean just the association. Our members know us individually. They know who we are because we built that rapport with them.
I love that. All right, here's your opportunity to brag a little bit. What are some recent organizational accomplishments that you're especially proud of? Take the past couple of years. What are some things that TLA, the Courthouse Library, have done that you want people to know about?
Well, I have to tell you that we all talk pre-COVID, post-COVID. So we'll talk during COVID. When we closed down, we sort of spun our heads around. I went for a few very long walks because I needed to do something. And then we figured out how the heck to use Zoom, rescheduled all the education programs we did, and threw in a bunch more because people were going, we need to talk about this, we need to do that. In 2020, we did more education programs than we had ever done before and since. We were doing it from home. and it was working. But we jumped on it quickly. Again, a benefit of being a small association means you can turn things on a dime. It was there was three of us going, okay, let's do this Zoom thing together and let's figure this out. We did. And our members and I think non-members really enjoyed it. So that makes me really proud that we were able to address people's needs. Now, sometimes because we're a local association, we're ignored a little bit. But during COVID, there was a regular meeting of stakeholders talking about what's going on in the courts and, digital signatures and all kinds of stuff. It was, some of the bigger associations were there and representatives of MEG and the courts. And they had a communication that we got, but our members didn't know how to get it. So we started sending that out regularly on a very scheduled time. At the beginning, sometimes it was daily because there was so much coming down, and later morphed into a once a week kind of thing. And it was just about what's happening. We had people join the association so that they could get this email because they learned how valuable it was. It was clear to us that people didn't know where to go. Do I go to this site and that site and this site? Well, if we could pull it together, or someone else had already started doing some of that work and we could share it, we always gave credit to where we got it, but people were just happy that we were sending it to them. So those are two things that I'm very proud of. I mentioned the awards gala and the evolution to get to the point where it sells out. It didn't used to sell out. Our profile has raised. People know who the TLA is. We use social media. It's great. We communicate with our members, but how do we reach the non-members out there? So we're very active in LinkedIn, and I don't have the numbers, but I just know that we're on an upward trajectory. So we constantly have more followers, more people are interested in what we're doing, what we have to say. And it's not just advertising our programs, we're doing meaningful things. For example, recently, there were elections at the Law Society. Now, the TLA did not take a stand. We didn't endorse anyone. But we know that historically, voter turnout in venture elections is really low. And we felt that it was important to remind people of the importance of voting, inform them about the issues, explain why it's important, what the ventures do. So we had a program last year called Behind the Scenes at the LSO. So we had a few ventures and the treasurer speaking, trying to impress on people. Hey, if you want to run, this is what we do. And if you don't want to run, well, at least vote. And through the whole leading up to and through the whole voting period, we were on social media pointing people to information on the Law Society page. How do you register? What are the deadlines? How many people are you allowed to vote for? It's a complex process. It's not like yesterday's mayoral election, right? I know there were 102 names, but it's one tick. Whereas this is complicated. So I think that was significant that we were doing that. And we worked with the Federation of Ontario Law Associations on that. We have a good partnership with them. Now, the other thing is the advocacy piece. I just jotted down a few things because I thought you might be asking about this. So we're doing a submission on modes of proceeding in civil, family, and superior court, commenting on the LSO certified as specialist program, the LAO's tariff reforms. I think the Criminal Committee has something to say about Bill 15 and the Fairness for Road Users Act. These are just the last month or two. We take our role very seriously in advocacy and making sure Toronto lawyers' viewpoints are known. So those are a few of the things.
Just a few.
Yeah.
That's a very busy association.
It is.
That's so cool. So looking ahead to the future then, fast forward 5 years, what do you want your organizations to have achieved in the next 5 years? What does success look like for you in 5 years?
Well, I think that we have some opportunities in increasing our membership. I know that not everyone joins associations. There's different mindsets about that. But I think that we've proven our value. Our membership dues are not outrageous, quite affordable. So I think that we will continue to see some growth in that area. But more than that, I want to see the library really thrive. There's constantly innovation from publishers, as you know, and we need to ensure that we continue to keep up with that and provide the resources to our lawyers, but only the resources that they really need, right? So this is the challenge. You know, if you walked into the library and said, well, I'm going to do some in-depth tax research, I will say, not here, because that work happens in the big firms. Why would I spend our money on resources that won't be used? So, you know, there's always that tension, what's available, what's used, and making sure that we're providing our members and actually the library, anybody can walk in and use it. Anybody who walks into the library, the resources they need. So I'm looking at that. There's actually Learn has introduced some funding. They got a little bit of money from the Law Foundation, and I have an idea for 1 or 2 things for next year. So I'm hoping my application will be met positively, and I'll be getting some money there. Now on the association side, we're starting to build some partnerships. The TLA was instrumental in the roundtable of diversity associations coming together. They actually met in this boardroom, the very first meeting when our president said, let's bring all these people together and talk about issues. There are 1 or 2 smaller associations that don't provide a lot to their members. So I said to them, well, if your members pay their membership dues to you, let's figure out how they can benefit from some of the TLA programming at a member rate. You know, if we help each other, we're stronger. It's a competitive market, but I also do feel like together we can do more. So there's those kinds of opportunities. And then I'm also always looking for partnership opportunities where I can diversify our revenue. For years, we've been working with a company called CPD Online. So we have these great education programs. They're well reviewed. We get CPD, EDI, all of that. We record them. And then they're available on CPD Online. Anybody in the province, or actually anybody in the world who's got a computer and a credit card, can watch the programs. But it means that in Ontario, lawyers from as far north as, I don't know, Kenora to Windsor or wherever can watch our programs. Sometimes I think we forget how lucky we are in Toronto. We've got a lot of people we can call on to speak. And in some of the smaller communities, they may not have that variety and those opportunities. So our programs are quite popular on CPD Online. And looking at some other partnerships where, you know, might be some sponsorship money, you know, whatever we need to do to make sure that we can balance that budget, ethical and meaningful, let's do it.
Absolutely. So along those lines, very important question now, how can people support TLA and the Courthouse Library?
Well, as I said, the library's open. Anybody can walk in. So if you're curious, please come to 361 University and come up to the library, and we're very welcoming. We love people who haven't been here before. But that's a bit, you know, I know Toronto's a big city and who's going to come in. So go to the website and become a friend. It doesn't cost anything to become a friend. You'll get some communication from us. You'll get the TLA update every week. You'll find out about our education programs. You'll see what kind of news we're announcing in the update. And maybe you'll decide to come to an event come to the summer pub or the sunset social, the awards gala, whatever. We're happy to have guests there. You'll have to pay a little bit more if you're not a member, but hopefully through a little continuous relationship, you might start to think, maybe I should join the TLA. Or maybe I could talk to them about an education program. I could be a speaker. I have an expertise in this area and I'd like to share it. Or I write really well and I'd like to contribute to the Toronto Law Journal. So, you can pick your game, so to speak. I don't know if that's the right term, but you can say how involved you want to be. Do you want to just sit back and watch from your desk and look at the education? Do you want to shake a few hands at a social event? Maybe eventually join the association, become a part of a committee. We do a lot. We don't have a lot of staff, but we have a very engaged board and a very healthy committee structure. And we rely on those people. So there's an opportunity. There's lots of ways someone could get to know us and hopefully get a little more involved.
I like that, Joan. You should consider sales at some point.
My very first job was in library automation sales.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew it was there somewhere. My final question, what advice would you give to other people who want to be a successful executive director, leader of a nonprofit organization such as yours? You've gone through a great career trajectory. You're clearly very successful as the executive director of the TLA. What advice would you have for people who want to replicate your own journey?
Okay, so through my journey, at some point, I got a designation, Certified Association Executive. I realized when I started working at the TLA, my library skills will only get me so far. The common sense is good, but I think I need more. So I started taking courses with the Canadian Society of Association Executives. And in one of those courses, we had to develop our own professional development plan. And I'm not talking about some vague ideas. We had to articulate it on paper. I think everyone should have their own professional development plan. And what it is an assessment of who you are. What do you like to do? What don't you like to do? What motivates you? Really get a good understanding of yourself, because there's no point in saying, I'm going to do sales when speaking to people terrifies you, right? You have to make sure that everything fits. So get to know yourself really well. And if you have to, there's tools out there. Myers-Briggs, the Clifton, StrengthsFinder. Some are free, some you have to pay for, but they're a good jog. If they're like, I found the Clifton StrengthsFinder very useful because it really did help me identify what I already kind of knew about myself, but it pointed it out. So you learn about yourself. I know it sounds kind of stupid, but really, I think that's important. And then you might even do a personal SWOT. What are your strengths, your weaknesses? What are the opportunities and threats? Where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? We both know the world is changing fast. You can't say in 20 years I want to do this. Who knows if what'll be going on in 20 years. So what are your goals? Do you want to work in a larger law firm or be the ED of an association? Well, then what are the gaps? What don't you know that you think you might need to know? I had a few gaps. I didn't know anything about, like, I could do a budget and scribble my initials on an invoice, but banking, payroll, real finance and accounting stuff, didn't know anything about that. If I'd known I was going to take this job, maybe I would have taken a course like that before. So prepare yourself, start taking those courses. And there's so many opportunities. I'm not just talking about traditional stuff. I mean, there's free courses, there's all kinds of stuff now. But basically develop your skills. And I know you can't anticipate everything. Like the job at the TLA is pretty unique. I never would have thought that this is where I would be because, there's one courthouse library in Toronto. Who knew that, my predecessor would leave and when she did, and I'd take the job. So I think what I would say to everyone is be prepared as well as you can, but specifically for not-for-profit associations, I think being involved with the Canadian Society of Association Executives, getting your designation, and if you've got more time and money, get an MBA in not-for-profits. That was a little more commitment than I was willing to make, but I learned a lot through the CSAE. I had to take a bunch of courses, take an exam, and I have to, provide evidence of CPD every year, so I maintain my designation. I guess what it boils down to is find out who the people are who are meaningful in the industry you want to be in. I mean, I was heavily involved with CALL, the Canadian Association of Law Libraries, and TAL, got a lot of value from those associations, continue to. So when I started here, I knew there's got to be an association for my new people. Who are these EDs? Where do I find them? How do I learn? And it's worked out beautifully for me. I built a lot of connections in that community.
You found a community just like your own association provides a community to lawyers. I love that.
Yeah. It's a full circle.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, Joan, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed getting to know more about the Toronto Lawyers Association. I've really enjoyed attending some of the events. I've learned a lot and made some great connections there myself. So thank you very much for your time today, and look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun.